Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another edition of Scaleway Sessions, the show where we don't say the, except when I just said the. A big argument about whether you put the in front of Scaleway Sessions or not. Is it the Scaleway Sessions, Scaleway Sessions? Sort of like Facebook, but way less important, I guess. Anyway, welcome to Scaleway Sessions. I am, as always, your host, Dan. I'm the head of developer relations here at Scaleway. And I am joined, as always, by my erstwhile partners in crime, Diego and Eli. Introduce yourselves to the audience, please.
Hello, everyone. Diego, developer advocate here at Scaleway.
I'm Eli. I'm also a developer advocate at Scaleway. Have you seen that video of somebody pronouncing, it's a French speaker trying to pronounce English words, and squirrel is the one that really gets him.
Squirrel's a tough one.
Never
by a
heard
French
that.
speaker trying to pronounce English words, do you mean me? Sorry about that. Okay, very good. So welcome everybody to Scaleway Sessions. Super happy that you could join us as always. If you have not joined us before, thank you for joining us for your first time. So what do we do on the show? What do we do on the stream? Basically, we just sort of hang out for an hour and we talk about tech. And sometimes we have guests come on and we ask them questions and we reveal how foolish we are in the face of their technical or domain superiority. And that's fine because that's how we learn. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just hang out and we, hack on an open source project. We talk about Linux distributions, like whatever kind of comes to mind, right? So the idea is to hang out, have fun, learn some things for an hour. And that's the idea, right? If you like the style, if you like what's going on, do tell your friends, like, subscribe, smash the buttons, et cetera, do all those things. And if you think to yourself, hey, these seem like cool cats, and I have interesting or at least funny or entertaining things to say, and you would like to come hang out on stream with us, just hit us up on the Twitters, on the Mastodons, on the emails. If you were watching the stream last week, you have my email address. We should have screen capped that. Get in touch, and we'd love to have you on the stream as always. So what are we doing today, gang? What's the plan?
Maybe a short recap of what we did last week.
Yes, a short recap of what we did last week. You know what? Eli, what did we do last week?
We found a thing that we want to put on Kubernetes. The thing is called NocoDB. It's a sort of markets itself as an open source Airtable. So, you spin it up and you've got this relational database that you can interact with in a very user-friendly way. And we found a container image of that. And we did Docker to it so that it ran on a VM that Scaleway hosts, because we have that. It's free for us. Yay, professional perks. And this week, what we were thinking we would do is spin up an external database. So when you spin up that thing, it has a little SQLite database that lives with it, but you can obviously point it at your MySQL, your Postgres. I don't know if it has no non-SQL compatibility, but maybe it does. Don't know. We'll find out. Hey, there's a niche in the market there, clearly. So what we're going to do today is we're going to spin up an external database, populate it with some data, see if we can point our NocoDB instance at it and get it to read data from that, and for that to be the database that backs our instance.
So it's a SQL, SQL.
Yeah, and then there's lots of structured query language. So yes.
Kubectl, the same argument all over again.
I think SQL is not I think SQL as a pronunciation is pretty standard. You will find people saying SQL. I think one of the ones that's a bit more, you get a bit more variation is PostgreSQL. Like, is it Postgres? Is it like, how do you? Does it have the extra S in it, or is it PostgreSQL? I don't know. But you've got lots of flavors of. You've got lots of implementations.
One, right? Like MySQL.
Yeah.
MySQL.
MySQL.
Right. Yeah. MySQL. MySQL. Okay,
I would say MySQL.
Easy. Right, MS SQL, MS SQL. That sounds a little weird. I want to say SQL with the MS in front of it. I don't want to say MS SQL. I want to say MS SQL for some reason, but I want to say MySQL. I wonder why that is.
I bet there's a linguistics paper in that. Probably.
So yeah, this Kubectl argument.
We're back to the anthropology of computing.
It's kind of new because back in the day when I was first learning, that was the big argument: SQL or SQL. I remember when the forums were popular. Well,
Yep.
when
And then
were
you
the
have,
only way
you
to
know,
communicate.
what kind of SQL do you like? Because there's lots of different implementations of the standard, essentially.
Mhm.
So yeah, Postgres is what you have for your really heavy duty stuff in my experience, and then lots of other things that are a sort of middleweight, and MySQL is one of those, and then very lightweight stuff like SQLite. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I would say those are fighting words, depending on who you're talking to.
interesting. I mean, this is not to
Yeah.
say that you can't do heavy duty stuff with almost anything if you structure it right, but
Yeah.
a lot of
You
the
can do
time
heavy duty things with Mongo if you really want to, of
Oh
course.
yeah,
But,
yeah. They've got all their sharding
and then you have all the open source, because there was the whole kerfuffle around licensing with MySQL at one point, and then MariaDB got spun off, and so forth. You know, we mentioned earlier about NocoDB. Does it touch anything that isn't SQL? I'm going to overthink that going forward.
We just think of a new name for it. Now there'll be 3 competing standards.
Exactly. That's the best thing about standards. There's so many of them. We did notice when we were looking at the documentation last time that it made reference to Redis. So we don't know how or why, but maybe that's in the mix somewhere, right? Is it using that as a data store for the backend? Is it using it as some sort of caching mechanism? Is there some sort of alternate service that it needs a key value for? I don't know. Guess we can find that out too, right? Right on. Okay, so that's what we did last week. Was all that stuff, right? We got the NocoDB, we got it running in the container, we did some Docker up and some Docker down, and I forgot how to make Docker go for a little while. It was very entertaining. I swear to God, I'm an actual professional Linux system administrator. Seriously.
If you don't start being very bad at typing when people are watching, are you even really typing?
Are you even really typing?
Exactly.
Yeah. And today we were going to try maybe to go a little bit beyond using that built-in SQLite that it comes with. We're gonna get ourselves an actual. Let's go with Postgres. Postgres? How do we like Postgres?
Fine. Yeah. It's certainly one of the
Postgres.
databases of all time. So.
There you go. Exactly. It does all the things. It has the key value stores. It has different engines. It's fine. We'll go with that. And we're going to see if we can make those two things talk to each other. And you think to yourself, but Dan, isn't this supposed to be the Kubernetes talk time? But the answer is yes. And it was last time too. In fact, it still is, because we're treating this like it's a real project that we don't know anything about, because it is a real project that we don't know anything about. We're building this live on air using software that we looked at for the first time on stream last week. And we were discussing about this. Do we just want to jump right into Kubernetes or whatever? No, maybe not. Maybe instead we should go by steps, right? The first thing you do is you load the web page and you go, is this a thing? And the second thing you do is you go, does it have documentation? And then you go, okay, can I make this run on localhost? And then so on and so forth until you get to a point where you go, okay, this is actually the thing I want and it does the thing I expect it to do. Let's industrialize it. Right? Let's now get to a point where we need to think about, reliability and what happens if the server falls over? Do I still have access to it? And that's when, of course, Kubernetes enters the picture, right? So we're working towards that in a logical way and trying to keep as many variables out of the equation as we explore this new project as possible, so that by the time we get to feeling comfortable enough with it, that we go, yeah, let's rub a little Kubernetes on it. Right? That we're not trying to debug accessory issues that have nothing to do with kubectl itself. That's the idea, at least, right?
Or MySQL.
Or yes, exactly.
But yeah, sort of understanding the building blocks of okay, you have a thing. Why do you even want to do Kubernetes with it? If the thing, if your thing doesn't work well without Kubernetes, it's not going to work with Kubernetes.
Right?
So
Yeah.
you need to get the thing working first.
It's not a magic serum, right? Yeah, exactly.
I know we'd love to have those in software development, but they don't exist.
Not yet. Not yet.
We'll see.
Running around picking up health packs like it's a video game, right?
Who knows what ChatGPT 5 will bring?
Oh my God! No, you know what?
Health packs is just a coffee station, right? It's the coffee station that we have at the office.
We were that's the first and last reference to that thing you just talked about, Diego, on stream today.
Today only. All right.
I hope you enjoyed it.
That's one per stream.
Yeah, one per stream, exactly.
Like
Correct.
PG-13 movies.
Yeah, here you go. Exactly. All right. So, what is going on? Since we're talking about Kubernetes, though, before we jump into the thing, what is going on? In the world of Kubernetes, it's a fast-paced world. There's lots going on. It's a huge ecosystem, right? And we have been kind of on a Kubernetes kick at Scaleway for a little while now. Everyone's kind of excited about it. They got, we caught the Kubernetes fever, and we need the more cowbell, which is a Saturday Night Live reference for the youngs out there, which is a television reference actually for the youngs out there. And and we've been playing around with it with Kubernetes, and we've also been interacting with the community, and we're part of that community, of course, as well, because we do the Kubernetes. We're part of CNCF, and we have some cool stuff coming up. Isn't that right? Next week, even later this week, as a matter of fact. What do we have going on, if I'm not mistaken, on Friday?
Diego, do you want to take this one?
Who are you gonna call? It's Dr. Cube. Yeah, this Friday, Dr. Cube opens practice here at Scaleway Sessions. And we'll have an expert on Kubernetes who will be solving all of your questions, fixing all of your pains around Kubernetes. So yeah, join us, bring all of your questions. We'll do our best to answer all of them. We may not be able to do so, so maybe a new session, a new appointment will be made.
More content.
But yeah, definitely. So please feel free to tweet at us, send us a Slack message, send Dan an email. You already got his email address. And join us this Friday.
That's right. That's this Friday. Dr. Cube, tell your friends, solve all your problems on air, or at least make fun of them. All right. So what's coming up next week as well? We've got some cool stuff going on. But instead of being online, we're actually going to do it in person, if I recall correctly. Eli, what's going on next week?
For my purposes, the exciting thing is that I am doing a talk. We've got our Kube Talks, first of a series of sessions that we're going to be running at Scaleway. We're hosting them, and I am one of the two speakers. So yes, I'll be doing the talk that I actually did as part of my interview work for Scaleway. So it has to be at least good enough to get me a job. So hopefully good enough to turn up to and give 20 minutes of your time. I'm very excited about it. It'll be the first time for me on stage in a couple of months, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is actually kind of a lot for me. So get back into it.
Excellent. That's going to be super fun. I'm super looking forward to it. So if you happen to be in Paris next week, come check out Kubi Talks. Tickets are free. You do have to register just because there is limited seating. We aren't in like an arena. We're in a theater. But do come check it out. And if you happen to be in Paris and you happen to be around next week and you want to hang out with us even more, in fact, the day before Kuba Talks, we're doing the Jam, which is actually a meetup series that we did. It was called something else, but because marketing people have to rebrand things, we rebranded it, and now it's called the Jam. And we're going to be talking about some pretty cool stuff. But I don't want to go too far into it. If you're interested, search Scaleway space the Jam, and the Googles will find it for you. Super. Okay.
Is it jam like in jam that you spread on a piece of
or like
bread,
a jam session, like jamming on an instrument.
Both
it's both of those things and so much more.
I found my ukulele the other day. I'll bring my ukulele to Paris.
You should bring a ukulele to Paris. I'll bring a kazoo. We'll have a sesh.
Inflict myself on everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in. Today we're going to be taking a look at the thing we spun up, and we're going to maybe make a database go, and we're going to see if we can make those two things talk to each other. Does that sound about right? All right.
Yep.
Cool. So I'm going to go and move some things around on my screen here so that I'm at my domicile right now, and I have in front of me, one of these big ultra-wide monitors, which is a lot of fun. So I got a lot of stuff on it right now. It makes me feel very like futuristic, kind of Minority Report. I feel like I just want to be able to do this and move stuff around. Doesn't work yet. We're getting there. One day. So let me go ahead and share the screen.
Beep, boop, beep, boop.
Here we go. That's the window I want to share. And we'll wait for that to come up. That's the best. That's the best. I will never get tired of those little sounds.
That's why we do this.
That's why we do this. The whole reason we're
At least
streaming
that's
is so
why
we
I'm
can hear
here.
the little sounds.
You reckon I can expense the stream deck?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. So what did we spin up yesterday? Well, basically we just spun up an instance, right? So we're going to take a look at our instance. And does our instance exist anymore?
You nuked it so that people couldn't.
That's right.
Go to it and I don't know.
I remember doing that. I remember deleting it. So fantastic. We're going to go ahead and make another instance.
Even better, if you missed last stream, then no worries. We will do everything all over again.
So so if you missed the last stream, we're going to create another instance. Tell you what, I'm going to go through it real fast. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Eli and Diego, you're both professional talkers.
Yep.
What is going on right now? I am curious, do we have any further information about what's going on with the Docker free tier image hosting? I've read some stuff about it, but I haven't had time to dig into it. Do you know what's going on there?
Yeah, so last week it was kind of announced to a small group of people that had images hosted there that the plan that they were using was going to be killed, and was kind of was poorly communicated because people entered in this chaos mode where they were just screaming, "Docker is killing open source projects." And after hours during that same day, I believe, they had to publish another press release saying, "Hey, no, wait, we messed up. We communicated poorly. This is how things are going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And this is how things are going to be happening during this period." The actual contents of those press releases are not clear in my mind. I just glanced over them. Did you read them?
I haven't seen them. I think one of the points of confusion was about what was going to happen to existing hosted images.
Yep.
I think there was initially the impression was given. I'm using the passive voice. People got the impression that those images were going to disappear, and that people's existing workflows that pulled those images and spun them up and did all sorts of things with them, including Kubernetes, those workflows would be broken. I think that is no longer. I think Docker has now clarified that will not be the case, but they will no longer be hosting any new images produced by teams. I haven't actually read the press releases. This is my understanding, having not done the reading, which is obviously a much better situation. It still does leave maintainers looking for somewhere to host updates to projects that they're working on, so even just security updates, not even necessarily new content and features. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for Docker in this instance, because hosting these kind of things it costs money. It costs resources from your team in order to make sure that things are secure. There's going to be all sorts of safeguarding issues, I would assume. As soon as you're hosting content, there's a whole mess of stuff you have to consider that isn't immediately obvious to anybody who hasn't done that before, and it's something I've seen discussed in the context of running your own Mastodon server as well. But an instance where actually what you do is sometimes overshadowed by how you communicate about it, and it really highlights the importance of clear communication in these types of situations, which is a hard thing to do. So
indeed. Sometimes we are engineers, we are developers, we are technical people, and communicating properly to the outside world is sometimes difficult. So having a process of communicating which specific words and terms should be used for all sorts of different cultures and contexts. It's a job. It's an important role within a company.
We had this the other day in one of our streams. It was with Alexandra, and we talked about discoverability, I think was the word, or discovery. And we realized that sort of between 3 or 4 of us on the stream, we had 3 or 4 different ideas, that came to mind when about that word and what it means in different contexts. So yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to do, to communicate technical things and technical changes, especially when...
Speaking of communicating technical things, Diego, you should set the layout back to 3 heads instead of a screen share, because I'm not doing anything right now.
I quite like your headshot just being front and center.
Good.
I mean, it's great. I'm a beautiful looking man, but you know.
Catch me replacing my headshot with one of my cats.
So I was having so much fun talking to you that I just forgot about handling the stream.
Yeah, well, the thing I was just going to say is that this is particularly with the open source thing.
That was for me.
People are incredibly emotionally invested in, I mean, and rightly so, projects that they've spent so much time maintaining, making public, writing documentation for, and to have the future of those uncertain, like be made uncertain, is obviously a really stressful thing. And if the communication around it is not clear, that's only going to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Compound that situation. So while I say I have a lot of sympathy for Docker in this situation, I also, obviously, the open source maintainers who now have to find other solutions to making their work available to other people in a sort of secure and accessible way.
All right, so booted up an instance, reinstalled NocoDB, got it back to the spot where we were last week, which is that we have a project and it has a table in it, but that was of course with SQLite, right?
Yep.
So what we wanted to figure out today was how we can make that go with a real database, and that's what we're going to take a look at right now, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. I like the implication that SQLite is not a real database. It's just a toy.
Okay.
I can imagine.
I know exactly what you mean. One that you might use in production. Yeah, you wouldn't use SQLite in.
I take it back. I take it back. That was incorrect of me to say, and I don't mind making an error. Okay, SQLite is a real database.
This isn't Twitter. You don't need to. I'm only poking fun.
But
I'm going to get you cancelled for being discriminatory against SQLite.
Well, you know what? So we said that. This is actually interesting. What if we were just like, okay, it works, and then we just went right to the Kubernetes part, and we had multiple pods running, and each of them had inside of the Docker container their own volumes loaded from the file system. That was not the same SQLite database. Then what?
Essentially in memory.
Essentially in memory? Exactly. So that sounds like kind of a fun and ridiculous problem to have to show on stream, and
why
maybe
not?
we will at some point.
Let's find out.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. But for now, you know what? Why don't we take and see if we can make database go?
Let's be grown-ups and do Postgres.
Exactly. So we'll go ahead and share the screen. So we're going to make database go, right? And we have manage database. Okay, so we'll make a database instance. I don't know. Postgres is great. 14 sounds nice. Paris is good. That's where I happen to be right now. Selected configuration. Wow, look at this. Standby nodes, production ready. We don't need that. We don't need no production ready, nothing here. We're just playing around, right? We want again, we're just having fun, so we'll take the smallest one here. It's fine. It's fine.
More than enough.
Local star. I'm not even gonna press these buttons. I don't care what any of this stuff is, to be perfectly honest with you. All fields are required. Default username.
Aha.
I don't know, username? That's production ready, right?
Yeah, that's fine. No one will guess that.
Password. Yeah, that's password. And I'm gonna password is that. It's very weak. So there we go. Please don't hack us.
I like that the name it's generated includes nervous. No worries. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry. We're good. And then we're gonna.
The password is probably too weak. So
the password is probably too weak. Okay, hold on.
Scaleway cares about your security. Doesn't let you make that mistake.
Fine.
Does it let you auto-generate one with the password manager?
Yeah, generate password.
There we are.
Right there.
Okay.
Well, we'll just let that go.
I need some elevator music in my stream there.
Dun, 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 dun.
Maybe this one.
Oh, actually, we can't sing "Girl from Ipanema" too well. If the timing had been good on that, it would have been so good.
Yeah, that would have been really nice.
Yeah, we can't sing too well, otherwise we'll get dinged for copyright strikes.
Yeah, I don't think singing too well is going to be the thing.
Speak
That's
for
what we have to worry about. Very good. So anyways, that's continuing to go. And while that's continuing to go, we must assume that it is, of course, working. We were talking a little bit about, Docker and the free tiers and how difficult it is to communicate on these things. And the reality is that anytime you have a thing that's out there that people use and love and it's a big deal, and you want to make any type of change to it, good, bad, up, down, red, orange, doesn't matter. Any type of change is going to freak people out, right? And I don't necessarily mean that negatively. I'm not saying people are going to like flip out because of, they can't handle themselves or whatever, but like most humans kind of like things to not change that much.
Do you remember about 10 years ago when the Facebook UI changed every 6 months, and every time people would act like it was the end of the world?
Right.
Yeah.
And no, it's just they moved a button somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a big deal. So how you communicate even small changes is hard. And then when you have something like this, which is what you're saying is we have supported for years and years and years and years the sort of backbone of much of what the modern internet runs on, and we're modifying it. How you communicate on that is, well, there's no one perfect way to do it that everybody's going to get. There's just a whole bunch of different ways that are going to result in different backlashes, right? Did they choose the best one out of the gate? Don't know. But it's tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't know what the internals of those decisions were. Like, what's the team who gets to decide what gets communicated? Who are they beholden to? Do they have legal requirements to include certain wordings, or to say things or not say things, or I don't know. Yeah. You have to assume that the team making those communications are very smart people working with weird constraints.
You have to assume that, right? So I don't know, Docker and what are some other computer things? Linux,
Python. Oh, PyScript. I'm repping PyScript today. Hang on.
There we go. Hey, select things. There we go. Look at this. It's Airtable, everybody. Woo. Software. I'm just playing around with this because this is not exciting to see the database initializing. Interestingly, as we talk about languages, and that also has its own pitfalls, right? You mentioned this while I was busy noodling around, and it's one thing to translate from language A to language B. It's entirely another to kind of localize things as well, right? And people, I speak a handful of languages, and sometimes I get words mixed up in my head, and that's okay. It happens. And you'll pick the word that if you were to look up in a dictionary how to translate it, that's the word. But when you say it out loud, something comes across as strange, and everybody kind of looks at you because it doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right, even though it's grammatically correct. And contextually, it makes sense. It's just the wrong word.
This is a lot of how I do humor, is I'll say something that's correct, but I said it in such a weird way, Yeah. But
Yeah,
and
there
I
you
do
go.
that just as a monolingual, essentially English speaker with a handful of conversational bits and bobs in other languages. I noticed that your user for this instance is called Luke Skywalker.
Yes,
Should
Luke
have a bunch of
Skywalker was the
Star Wars related words as well.
random selected instance, exactly. So that's fine. I'm okay with that. Enter. All right. So like when you do stuff live, sometimes stuff doesn't work out the way you expect it to. And this is not working out the way we expected it to. And that's okay, because
Maybe
when you do
it's the
things
UI.
live, it doesn't happen. So instead of that, let's mess around with this. One of the things that we were talking about is what happens if the SQLite, the file, right, that the SQLite database, that in-memory SQL data or SQL engine, right, has to write out the data to a file. What happens when you do things with that file? Right? Why don't we find out? Do you want to find out?
Yeah, I have a prediction, which is that if you move that file while the program is running,
yes,
you will have some kind of crash.
Sure. That is a fair prediction. So anyways, we have this, this running here, right? We know we can select, we can Docker and Linux. Okay, super, right? It's working. Now I'm going to go into my my terminal, which you can't see. I guess I could show you the terminal as well. And we'll just do this. Boom. And here we have our terminal. We're on the machine.
Oh,
right,
our machine is competent this time. Good. That bodes well.
Yeah, there we go. And we go in here to NocoDB, and we see there's a noco.db, and we had a big laugh about NocoDB and so forth. Now, what happens is a good name. So I'm just going to make a quick copy of this, and then I'm just going to wipe it out. What do you figure is going to happen?
Permission denied. Oh, no, but your root, I suppose. So
gone.
Yeah.
Gone. It's absolutely gone. Now what's going to happen here? I'm going to reload this.
Oh, will it just generate you a new empty one or something? Maybe while it's in... Interesting.
I'd say it will fail.
So, oh, that's right. You can actually see. I was doing
no, we can't
browser,
see
which you can't see.
This is peak like 2020. We were all doing.
As you can see here, there's nothing here, right? This is empty, and I'm going to take and reshare.
So yeah, I would say it will fail, give you an error because
we've gone back here.
Yeah, we'll need to create everything from scratch.
I'm going to hit reload and see what happens. Ready?
Yeah.
Look at that, still there.
Oh, interesting. Is it because it's in memory? Now, if you change something, it can't read into, it can't write into it. It's trying to write.
Is that an error modal I see up here? Attempt to write a read-only database.
Does that constitute a crash? I wonder.
Well, that's interesting, though, isn't it? Right. So it didn't. I mean, it didn't fail to exist as an application.
What if you open it in another tab?
What if I open it in another tab?
Yeah, so copy that URL into another tab. Yeah.
Well, I think Dan did a hard refresh, right? So yeah, so it's saying you can't insert into a read-only thing. So I think what happened is I don't know, something has changed. It's detected that we don't have a file anymore, and it said, okay, what I've got now is only read-only. But that's interesting because what it has must be in memory. I don't know. I'm spitballing here.
Which memory?
The RAM of the VM.
So if I had to guess, and what I am doing ultimately, of course, is guessing here. My guess is that the application is still running, right? And that it's loaded the data into some sort of memory, right? And that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at, like, I don't know, basically a JavaScript app that's running inside of the browser. And this is the last good data that we had, right? And then when we try to add any more data to it, it'll go no, because in fact, the actual database doesn't exist anymore. Would be my guess.
Do you reckon it's running in browser memory or in
No.
server memory on the VM?
I just checked another version, and no, it's not using either local storage, session storage, or an IndexedDB.
Right.
Okay.
So it is server memory then.
Yep. You could check maybe the
tracks to
network.
me. I feel like, because if you're going to use this solution for a large database, and it by default ships with SQLite, it's not going to want to use browser resources for all of that. You'll end up with a lot in your browser.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to copy back that file. Okay.
Yep.
So there, I've put it back onto the file system. I'm not going to switch back to the console. Everybody knows what the file looks like.
But you changed something just now. You added something in. Did you not?
And I'm going to reload. I'm going to see what happens. Oh. Oh. That's very interesting. This, that.
Does the process running the thing no longer own or have write access to that file?
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Could you manually change that in your terminal? Find the process ID and give it write permission? I don't know how many process IDs are even going to be running.
Well, that's kind of funny, right? Because the thing that needs it, again, this is an object that's on the host's file system, right? That is being loaded inside of the container, and we removed it from the host's operating environment, right? And we just put it back. That doesn't indicate then that the container necessarily even knows anything about the fact the file is returned, necessarily, right?
If you put it back in the same place, that's
Yes.
memory that's mounted, like as in you. I don't know the exact terminology, but like that's memory that the container has persistent access to.
And yet here we are.
Yeah. Well, it still knows. Well, actually, I don't know if it knows about the database or if it only knows about the thing it has in memory. Is the thing it's saying, I can't write to this is read only, the thing it has in server memory, or is it the file on the file on the host?
Maybe the logs.
It could result in the same error, essentially.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the container.
Yep.
Right?
I think it will just work.
That DB file back in place where it's expected to be. So I'm going to do that now. That is running.
Can you check the read-write permissions on it?
Well, I can.
Yeah.
They're what one would expect.
Okay.
And here we're going to take and reload this. Oh, it just takes a second to fire back up. That's okay. Don't worry about it. This is normal. It's just taking a second to start back up again. Right? There we go.
Software engineering is knowing what's normal bad and what's bad
exactly.
bad.
So here, it started back up again. We'll add a new row. Hi. Works as
it does
expected.
Just work. Okay.
Yeah, it does just work. So this is also a little bit of interesting insight for us, right? When we're thinking about how does our application that we're looking to deploy ostensibly into production someday, right? How does it behave when unexpected things happen? And we have just now done an unexpected thing and seen how it behaved, right? That's an interesting bit of learning. We don't necessarily understand or know why it behaved exactly the way it did, but that we have an idea now of some of these behaviors under some of these conditions. It helps us to better understand how our systems level set our expectations, and also start to think about if we want this to be able to be production ready, right? If we want to be able to say, yes, we can rely on this because even when things go wrong, it's still usable, knowing those failure modes and how it reacts to those failure modes is an important part of that puzzle.
Yeah,
right?
You could still read the data. That's a usable, it's not a complete crash when the file was removed.
Well, I could read almost like a snapshot of it, right?
It was no longer interactive.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That's a pretty graceful failure mode, I would say. I was expecting like a hard crash in terminal output.
Yeah, for sure. So that works just fine. Really happy about that. And that gives us a little bit of insight into maybe some of how things could go wrong if we were running multiple instances of this behind, a load balancer or something, right? Like say we just go, no problem. If a server crashes, we'll just have the load balancer redirect the request to another machine.
But it's got different things in its RAM. So
exactly, because if it's SQLite, it's got different things under the hood. It would work, but we'd get a different version of the database.
Or you're trying to edit a row that doesn't exist in that instance or something. You get
Who knows?
You get all of the sort of concurrency issues that Postgres is designed to handle gracefully.
There you go. Exactly. So those are some interesting and fun things. If we wanted to dive a little further more, into these failure modes and behaviors, that would be really fun stuff to check out. But already this has given us some insight, which is a lot of fun.
Making me want to go away and do a PhD on like database sharding or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lifetime's worth of intellectual stuff to get into here for sure.
We have a database now, which is nice. It's nice to have a database, right?
I suggest you don't nuke this one before the next time we do office hours.
Yeah, we just turn it off maybe, right? As opposed to destroying it entirely. And what we now need to do though is, okay, we have a database, but the issue is that when we started this instance of NocoDB in Docker, we started it using the instructions for SQLite. Now what? Right? We want to go to Postgres, but we started here. We want to go here, but we started here. Do you think that this is something that we can just configure inside of the NocoDB web interface, or do you think we're going to just end up wiping out the Docker container and starting over again? Predictions.
It's using the same image, so you won't need to do another pull.
Yep.
You're just running it with different parameters. But that means you will need to restart the container. Or at least according to the way that they have told us to start they have told us if you want to connect it to Postgres, this is how you start the container. They have not included instructions for appointing a living server or a living container. Maybe you can, but that's not what the instructions tell us, is my take. I don't know, Diego, what do you think?
I'm just following that screen, and yeah, this goes against my prediction that you were not going to be able to add another source.
Ooh, it's a new one though. So I wonder what will happen if there's interplay of data between the two sources. What if you want to link a row from one to something in the other?
Interesting. Yeah, my prediction was going to be...
These are great questions, and we're going to find out, right?
I was going to say just, same image. So you just change the environment variable where you set up the connection to your database. And then when starting up the application, you will get that instead of the MySQL.
I wonder if that's now gone into some config file that will persist when you restart the container.
That's another excellent question. Yeah, that's another excellent question. So now we have two databases, which I think is, that makes us web scale, right? Two databases?
Absolutely. Next thing, multi-cloud, then we're sorted. What are the buzzwords for me?
Let's deploy this to a satellite. We don't have to worry about anything.
I've got a Raspberry. I've got a Pico W somewhere lying around. We can put it on that too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So okay, with two databases, now what? Right? Wait, what's this? Oh, look at this default. Oh, it's two different database.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting.
Can you link from one to the other?
That's a big question.
Let's find out. So let's add a new table in here.
Can we have this one be Star Wars themed?
Or
will we get taken down by Big Disney?
Jar Jar.
All right, there we go. And we'll put, whatever.
Darth Jar Jar. My favorite.
Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theory.
There you go. Ooh. All right, we're gonna have to go deep on that one. Another time.
Scaleway sessions after hours where it's just me monologuing about Star Wars.
This is Star Wars conspiracy theories all the way down. So now we have two databases going. One here that we've already established is the SQLite. We messed around with the file and didn't like it. And now we have a proper Postgres database over here. That's interesting. Do they have anything to do with each other? I don't know. This is something more talking about NocoDB than anything else. But it's interesting that we can interact with multiple data sources within the same interface. That opens up some interesting possibilities for structuring data and storing data in multiple locations. I don't know if they can talk to each other. I don't know the software well enough.
Well, do they have a sort of linked row concept? Sort of foreign key type thing.
Yeah, you could do.
Can you try and link Darth Jar Jar to Linux, or not Linux, but this, that, or the other that you put in the first sheet?
So you can go to the top of the list, and there you
the record.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's.
But it's only on this one.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right. Which I can see why that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, many-to-many is implemented in different ways across various SQL instances, right? I think Postgres does it differently than SQLite, whether you've got pivot tables or not, or something that's very similar to a pivot table. So it would kind of make sense to limit that to the same database.
Specific DB type. Would there be a thing where you'd be saying like this has to be on one type? This particular piece of data needs to be on a specific database? Maybe that's.
I mean, even Postgres versioning, right? Like maybe there's different constraints about string length.
Yeah.
Pull that one out of thin air is probably not true.
Okay, well that's interesting. We now have two databases. One that is a bit more volatile, maybe you might say, than the other. But we have two. We could think about, and spend some time thinking about how to make these two things talk to each other. But that's more thinking about NocoDB itself and less about thinking about how are we structuring the infrastructure that makes it go.
Yeah, you wouldn't probably do that in production unless you have specific needs. So we probably don't need to think about it for pretending that this is a real project.
Yeah, exactly. So, we could put some more stuff in here, and we could add another column. Just to show that indeed this is a database and there's stuff in it, right?
Maybe should we talk about why did we land on this project and what do we want to achieve with NocoDB at some point? What will it solve for us?
What will it solve for us?
Oh, everything.
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of this started basically as I used to use Airtable a lot. And my biggest thing is I just want to be able to use Airtable again. But working at Scaleway, as we do, we're really into kind of rolling our own stuff, right? We're a cloud provider. We like open source. We like feeling that we're the ones that are responsible for our data, that if something is going to go wrong, I want it to be my fault. Right?
Yeah, I mean, and we have access to hosting. And we're developers. We love to sort of scratch our own itches, is the phrase in English. Dog fooding, sort of using things that we build. Precisely. I guess that's more appropriate for products that we're providing. But yeah, and so we want to keep track of tasks that we have coming up and things like, where are we submitting to in terms of conferences, and what are interesting people that we've talked to that we want to come and twist their arms to come and stream with us.
And as always, if you do want to come on stream, let us know, because we're always looking for fun people to learn some stuff and experiment with. And so we got a number of use cases for things that we feel like we'd like to build out inside of a piece of software like this. We identified two pieces of software. This was one of them, NocoDB. There was another one. I can't remember the name of it. Base Row was another one we looked at. There actually was a few. There was more than two that we looked at, and we just randomly started with this one. That was fine. All right. So what did we accomplish today? We set up another database, and we realized that we could just kind of hook things into it, right? And that's super, and that's great. As always, all of this within the optic of going, how can we then, industrialize this deployment by deploying it using Kubernetes? So I feel like we've gotten now to the point where we understand that we can spin up Docker containers and the software inside of them will do what we expect it to do, right? In this case, it's the load a web application.
And sometimes not what we expect it to do, like not crashing when you remove a load-bearing bit of its infrastructure, apparently.
Well, there you go, which is great, right?
Yeah.
The software here is like, you know what? The thing I expected, the database I expected to write to is not available right now. So
Call back later.
Exactly, which is good. That's a good failure mode, right? Ideally, that won't be a problem going forward because we have now a proper database, managed database instance, running on the back end. Now, to be clear, when we started it up, we did not choose the production ready one. It's fine. Don't worry about it. If this was a real production app, we would have done that, but of course it's not, so we didn't. What we can now think about for the next time, because we're only a few minutes away from the end of our hour together here today, is what that's going to look like sort of in the Kubernetes land. So now, I do happen to know what this is going to look like in Kubernetes land, but let's pretend that we didn't.
I have a question based on that.
Oh, sure.
Yes, it's been my biggest question since I heard about Kubernetes some time ago.
Yep.
And it is, right, you have several instances of your app distributed, so fault tolerant, all good.
Yeah.
But then you have one database.
Yes.
So your database fails, everything fails. Now, you will ideally then try to have multiple instances of your database. How do you keep them in sync?
Yes.
That's my big question there.
So it's a great question. And it's just two parts to it, right? Part number one, you're talking about is your application, and it's running in magical Kubernetes land. And part two is the database that, for the purposes of this example, is not running in magical Kubernetes land. It's just a classic old school database running somewhere. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, the question is, if that database goes poof, then what happens? So again, question, database goes poof, obviously the database is not there anymore. So really the question is how do you make the database itself more resilient, right? And one of the answers could be Kubernetes, right? That's an answer. But then what do you do? Because the data has to go somewhere and the data has to remain consistent. And that's when the actual database engine is going to come into play. How does the database engine itself store and shard data in multiple locations, potentially, right? You've got different types of database engines out there that have been developed since there have been, computers, really, right? And you have, fairly straightforward models, dating back decades and decades and decades, where it's just files on a file system with some type of row and tab structure in them, and they're loaded literally as sheets inside of the interface that you're using, right? If you've ever had to interact with the database in like the 80s, that's what was going on. By the way, I am old, but I was too young for that. Rolling forward now, you do things like, like Elastic, for example, with like Elasticsearch, right? Which has these like really complex ways of storing and sharding data and making sure the data is stored in like multiple places, so that if any one node fails, there's a copy of that data.
That happens.
It happens.
It's normal.
So, having multiple copies of the data sitting in different places, that's super important. And then the database engine has an awareness of where it is. How does it know that? Again, it's going to come down to something like, it could be alphabetical. It could be, there's a billion ways you could sort of think about it. And so the data itself ideally is stored in multiple locations. The engine is aware of where those locations are. If any of those locations fail, it can just go get it from somewhere else. And then you have some capacity for dealing with how many copies of it you want. Do you want 1 copy, 2 copy, 3 copies? Maybe you set that. Maybe it's set by the engine itself via some sort of statistics, rub a little machine learning on it, right? That's fine. That works as well. And then you run into problems like, okay, if we have multiple copies of the data, how do we keep them in sync? Right? And then
you find that consistency is a very overloaded term in the sense of eventual consistency. There's a speaker I saw, Sam Newman, who had a better alternative, and I was just trying to find the tweet thread where I tweeted about it, but couldn't. So I'll find that. I'll retweet it later. It reminds me of the story about, I don't know if it was one of the Apollo missions. It was a moon mission, and they had 4 computers, one of them running in a completely different OS, like from the ground up, completely different stack. And this was so that if one of them went down and then one of them disagreed with the other 2, you still had majority. You could still reconstruct truth from the data that you had. Because if you had 3, yes, you'll always have a majority if one of them disagrees. But then what if you lose one of them and suddenly you've got 2 things that don't necessarily measure the same thing and you don't know which is true? So lots of redundancy there.
An acronym you're going to see pop up right away when you start researching this is CAP, C-A-P, CAP theorem, right? So CAP theorem it's trade-offs is really what it is, right? You may have heard, fast, cheap, good, pick 2, right? When it comes to basically everything, right? CAP theorem is that, it's trade-offs. So you have one which is about consistency, atomic consistency, which is the C, right, in the CAP theorem. And then you have availability, that's the A in CAP theorem. And then you have partition tolerance, which is the P in CAP theorem. So consistency is where every read receives the most recent write or an error, right? And that's it. So it's consistent immediately. Availability is where every request receives a non-error response without the guarantee that it's going to get the most recent write. So you're going to get the data. You just might not be necessarily the most recent data, right? And partition tolerance, which is what we were alluding to a moment ago, which is the system continues to function properly, even if data is missing, basically, right? And the data could be missing for any reasons. It could be the disk is not there. It could be the network partitions, right? It could be some firewall issue for any reason, right? Solar flares. So again, the consistency, you get the most recent data or you get an error. Availability, you're going to get the data no matter what, no errors. It just might not be the data you expect. And partition tolerance, which is you're going to get data at all when stuff on the back end goes wrong. And the trade-off is those 3 things. You can't have all 3.
You can't have perfect versions of all 3. And that's where you get that term eventual consistency, where you make a trade-off in time on consistency to allow the other 2.
Precisely. And then the other thing that's going to come up when you start to talk about CAP is, especially when we talk about consistency, is ACID, right? So ACID transactions. And I'm trying to remember what ACID stands for.
The A is atomic, right?
Atomicity, I think. Atomicity is the A. The C is consistency. The I is isolation.
I just Googled it, so I know what the D is.
What is the D? I can't remember.
Durability.
Durability. Very good.
And the explainer that came up was MongoDB, which is not a SQL database.
Well, there you go. Well, it doesn't have to be.
No,
right?
no.
It's
just
not SQL specific. Let's talk about databases, right? And so atomicity is really related to transactions. We talk about atomic transactions, right? Where each transaction is treated as a single thing. It's a unit. It's hence atom, right? It's a single unit which either succeeds or fails. But the guarantee that it's either succeeding or failing is a powerful guarantee. There's no half states. There's no unknown states. There's no, right, maybe this worked and maybe it didn't. You know whether it worked or it didn't. And that's a powerful guarantee. Then consistency, is about when we're talking about if data is sharded and it writes over here and it writes over there, did it write the same thing? Right?
Will the result of my read depend on which instance my request got routed to?
Yeah, exactly. And Eli, you mentioned eventual consistency a little while ago. We talk about it will definitely write to one spot right away. You
But
have
it'll take
that
a while to
guarantee.
percolate.
But maybe it'll take a while to write to other places. And a really common example of a very large, eventually consistent database that we use every single day and we don't even realize it is DNS, right? DNS is like the eventually consistent database,
And it
right?
can take 48 hours for your
Yeah.
creating a new record for that to propagate.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's really cool. And then you have isolation, which is about concurrency of transactions and so on and so forth, and about sequential ordering, right? So if the transactions have to be done in a very specific way, that they're isolated such that nothing can interfere with them.
How do you avoid deadlocks?
How do you avoid deadlocks? How do you avoid like situations where you've got two transactions that are attempting to do contrary things, right? And the one that we always learned about in school, which was bank machine. You go to a bank machine and you deposit money and pull out money at exactly the same time. What happens?
Do you get an overdraft
Right?
fee or no?
Exactly. And then durability relates to what will happen once the transaction has been committed, right? So we've gone through this whole process of making the things go. It's isolated. We're very happy that it's going to be consistent and so on and so forth. But then, like, what happens when all is said and done? The data has been written. Now what? Is the data going to stick around? Is it ephemeral? What happens if the power turns off? What happens if the node disappears?
Is it just in RAM on a VM somewhere or on a node that's going to get
exactly or some
scaling or whatever?
Some Linux system administrator is going to delete the file off the file system like an idiot. Right? And that's kind of what durability is about there. Anyway, that was a good way, I think, to end the session today with a little talk about databases and introduction to CAP theorem and ACID transactions and all that good stuff.
You can spend a lifetime learning this stuff, and it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, people do. And maybe we can, maybe that's a great idea. If any of you out there are into databases and into CAP theorem, and maybe you just want to play around with some different databases on stream with us, we can do some terrible things to them and see how they react. That sounds fun. Get in touch, and we'll break some database engines together. That sounds really great.
Amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
So we're at time. We're actually a little past time. Yeah. But that's okay, because this is our show and we can do what we want. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. As always, we have a lot of fun. I hope you learned something, or at least were entertained. And if you have anything you want to say, to communicate, want to learn about, let us know, because we probably want to learn about it too. Once again, I'm Dan. I'm the head of developer relations here at Scaleway, joined by Diego and Eli, developer advocates here at Scaleway. We've got Kuba Talks coming up next week if you happen to be in Paris. We've got Ask Dr. Cube coming up this Friday. Check our socials with the tweets and the mastodons and the links and I don't think we're on the Facebooks. It's fine.
Just MySpace.
Bebo.
Oh my God, we should set up no, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're setting up a MySpace page.
Where else are we going to publish the music from the jam?
There you go. Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.